Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is TDT, the Developing Trader, coming back at you again with another video. So here we go. Jumping on to our weekly projections analysis, our weekly analysis and projections, as they say. See what's happening this week with our news events that will be occurring during the second week of March. One quick thing, do not forget to update your clocks to our daylight saving time. Okay, that shift happened at 2 a.m. this morning. Ensure that you update yourself accordingly. So jumping into what we have going on, we have a clear early week. No news releases on Monday, and there are no news releases on Tuesday. Then we jump into Wednesday, bright and early at 8:30 a.m. We have core CPI happening in our pre-market. So we'll see what happens as we move into Wednesday. Things will be picking up. And then Thursday, we have unemployment claims coming in 8:30. And we end the week with a lot of action in the U.S. markets with core PCE, price index, preliminary GDP, core durable goods orders, prelim and GDP, price index. And also we have JOLTS coming in, jobs openings happening on Friday at 10 a.m., ladies and gentlemen, okay? So I want to reiterate, keep these times in mind. This is where you'll see a lot of volatility in entering the market, and you want to be prepared for that, okay? So let's jump into our analysis, starting off with Dixie. And here we are. If you've been following along for the past couple of weeks, or at least at the midweek, we did this breakdown here, and we were talking about price moving into this gap on the monthly. And you can see right now it is still in this monthly gap. This is a monthly chart, okay? And we were talking about price flipping this gap right here from our quarterly, where it was down here looking very bearish. But all it needed to do was tap into this gap, and then we have this push going on. There's a lot of things happening in the market with the war with the United States and Iran. I'm not getting into those things. We're strictly looking at technicals here. So ever since we saw this IO Fed on this 3-month, we were heavily bearish, but now things have seemed to flip. We'll confirm that flip this month, and I'm not gonna say this month. Let's look at the weekly here and see what we got. So I want to see price push above this gap here and give us a closure at the end of the week. If this is going to be bullish, it may get very animated and head straight up and take the liquidity right here above the market, moving into this FEG that's on the weekly. We'll see what happens there. On the daily, now at this point, what we want to monitor is what price does as it moves back into this gap. You see it swiped this liquidity here, but it never gave us a body above this area here. So with so much volatility happening right now, and with so much going on around the world in regards with, like I was saying, with this war that's currently happening, bombs are dropping, and we may need to take a look at oil real quick. So let's just see what happens if price wants to go up and get these liquidity levels that are sitting above the market here. So this week, even though these are levels that are a higher time frame, right now we want to see if price wants to drop back into any of these gaps below the market, taking the liquidity from these prior days here. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday's price action, along with Tuesday. So if it drops down, takes the liquidity from Tuesday of the prior week, we want to watch this gap, especially at the consequent encroachment level, and see if price wants to remain bullish, or if it gives us a gap straight down and we continue that bearish price action that we were experiencing before. So Right now it hasn't confirmed that it wants to get above this as yet, and it's more likely to continue falling back into this gap, and we could see what we get out of price action as it falls into that area. Let me see if it closed in this gap right here. So yeah, we did get through that gap, and then there was another very small gap here on the daily. You can see it here right between this price action and right there. You see price moved in. There were no bodies that were placed above this small little piece of price action that's sitting right at the bottom of a bigger gap. So just things that we're monitoring. So if it's going to remain bullish, we'd need by the end of the week for it to be challenging these wicks. It seems to me like it just wanted to run that. So now we'll see how far we fall and if we get any support on the way down. So let's jump into NQ next. All right, and here we go with NASDAQ. Looking at the monthly, let's actually jump into a 3-month here, because we spoke about this last week. Although we got some of that bullish action through the week, we were saying that this is the gap that I believe that NASDAQ is one of visit first and foremost. And I was saying that I think we'll get like a huge wick maybe into these areas and moving into this block. That's basically the same thing I was saying last week. That hasn't changed much from a 3-month perspective. On the monthly, let's just take a look how price closed here, right? Price closed at 24,952.75, and it opened here at 24682. So we had a big gap in between the closing and the opening of March. Price has now since went back up to rebalance that gap that it experienced, and now it's back down here, and we do believe it will be pushing lower. Let's look at the weekly and kind of see what transpired here. So you can see we were looking at this weekly gap at some point, and we saw where price went above, it pushed it through this wick as it may have wanted to challenge the all-time highs, unable to do so, gave up the ghost, and then we had price push below that gap and also the wider gap if we include all of this here, including the volume imbalance at the lower point. So from this perspective, you can see price went back up, could not even get back the consequent encroachment of the bigger gap, and unable to get back to this sort of void in price where there's no bodies, just a little wick in there. And you see price moved into that, the body respected it right here, and we rejected lower, pushed up, tried to get back in there, immediately rejects, and that's where we're at now. So between those two gaps, looking at that price action, we want to see price on the daily now. This is ugly as hell. Yes, it is. Look at this consolidation. So we had this run up during, it was this week or last week, I believe it was the prior week. Ran up, took that liquidity and gave it right back up, came below, took the liquidity below the market, gave another push up, but couldn't get back above that point before breaking back below these bodies. So right now, those are our targets that we mentioned on the higher time frame. And this liquidity will probably be challenged before the end of this coming week, right? So that's what we're going to be looking for on NASDAQ. Price opens, we'll see where that opens in a few minutes. It may want to push up. If it's unable to get above these highs, then we should be in the trajectory to head to some lower points in price, okay? And like I spoke about a few weeks ago, I did not mention it last week, but we were looking at this as one of our targets for lower prices at 22,779 for a long-term projection going into these summer months, March, April, May, June. Around that time, I think we'll be at these prices. So that's what we're looking at right now on NASDAQ. Let's take a look at one more thing. Okay, so we're just gonna take a quick peek at crude oil here and see what has been transpiring. You see that on a 3-month, this is a quarterly chart. You know, I like to start with my quarterly charts. You can see price has sprung into that gap above. Let's look at how that looks on the monthly. So we have this big surge in price action due to what's happening over there in the Middle East with this war with the US, and we're probably going to challenge these highs right now. Oil is not a market that I trade, but just looking at it just to see the action that's happening, where the liquidity is right now. Did already swoop up and take that liquidity. So oh, there we go. Wow, you see that right there while the video was going on? Liquidity has been neutralized right at the opening there. So this is probably gonna go up and a lot higher. 123 is the next major liquidity zone here. So we'll see what happens with crude oil during this week as well, okay? So that's going to be me for this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. You guys have a great one. Have a good week. Make sure you're protecting your capital and always keep a positive mind in these markets, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Y'all have a great one, and I'm out. TDT out. Peace.